Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about a methodology for building roadmaps as well as designing products. When I say design, I mean developing and shipping products using a lean product management methodology that myself and my team at Xero came up with a little while back and have been perfecting for a while. So just before we get going, a little bit about me. I'm Josh Vincent. I spent a good 9 years at Microsoft shipping a number of different things such as Windows Update, Windows Media Player, Zune, and the Bing iOS app. After that, I went to do some startup stuff in Silicon Valley at a company called OnLive, doing a game console, and then my own startup called Tronic FM, and then of more recent, I've been spending time at Xero doing payments infrastructure for Xero. One of the reasons that I've put this deck together is based on many past experiences where you're working for an executive or a team, or you're the executive and you want to effectively, you've got this amazing idea for what the features should be for a product, or someone else has, and they're like, just go do this, right? And you're like, you scratch your head and you think to yourself, wow, there's something doesn't quite feel right about this. Or maybe it does feel right, but you don't really know how to cost it. But you have to figure out how it fits into your roadmap. Also, as a product manager, you're always effectively trying to figure out how do you weight things against one another. You've got these competing ideas and features coming from customers, sales, marketing, engineers. You've got technical debt to deal with. And then you've got your execs telling you, hey, we really need to do this. So how do you put all of those things, into a effectively mental model so that you can balance them out against one another and be very open and transparent with everyone that's sending you the stuff to do. This is one of the key challenges of product management, and it's something that myself and my team came up with this methodology to help. So effectively, when we came up with EDD, or evidence-driven design, was because at Xero, our execs were asking us to build stuff and we were just a bit skeptical. So we just effectively devised a crude way to validate the assumptions that we're making. And then over time, we kind of landed on this process called EDD that we came up with and named, etc. This image is kind of a fun one, right? It's how do we cost? You've got this pram, it's got huge wheels, and you're like, oh, we would have added the hubs, but it would have cost more. Like, how do you know that the wheels were the right thing to put on this pram? EDD is a way to look at the infinite possibilities of things we can build with our limited resources, and try to identify the most important things to work on. Part of the process is a structure or methodology for having good conversations with people. Like, if you take anything away from this presentation as, hey, these techniques aren't going to result in the perfect thing being built, but they are going to result in the right conversations being had across the company. So EDD is based on lean methodology, and it's also an evidence-driven based on sort of scientific method. So we want to use data as much as possible to make decisions. Sometimes you've got to go and gut. Sometimes you don't have data. The data just doesn't exist. When it does exist, we use it. When it doesn't exist, we make it up, but we identify it as a made up and that it's based on assumptions. And then we run experiments. We design experiments around those numbers to prove them out or disprove them, for that matter. We run those experiments, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And once we've run them, we can measure the return on investment for what you're building by doing that experiment. So over time, the estimates tend to get better and better. And we become more and more confident in the decisions we are making for a specific product. So just a quick overview. The EDD process is pretty simple from a product management perspective. There's more that I don't cover in this deck about how it goes down into the development process. Our development team also uses EDD. in a sort of agile Scrum meets Kanban kind of fashion, which is very effective. And typically, if you're running through the EDD process, and from this product management perspective, the feedback that we end up getting from developers is that they know exactly what we're building and why we're building and why it's prioritized, which is amazing for any, if you've been in product management for a while, you'll know that hearing that from developers is awesome, because it's often difficult to make sure everyone understands why we're doing stuff. Three parts of EDD process are the product description, so just putting together a sheet that is the overview of the product or feature you want to build. It's then scoring it, so scoring that feature or product relative to all the other features of products that's in your roadmap. And then you do this thing that we call a roadmap, which is figure out all the activities that are needed to be done in order to build and ship the product. These sort of flow naturally in somewhat linear fashion. We'll go into each of those. So with regards to the product description sheet, you would have seen similar sheets in the, there's similar like sort of program management product-y type sheets that people fill out to the one that we're going to look at now. This one we put together based on Eric Ries's lean methodology book, as well as combining it with a couple of other things that were important to Xero. But basically, if your CEO comes to you and says, hey, you guys have got to go build this now, you can effectively, the goal of the sheet is to spend 60 minutes going through it, filling it out, making sure that you've covered all the main areas of a product that you should have considered before you start building something. At that point, you're ready to try to figure out, hey, is this really something we want to build? Hey, CEO or exec, are we on the right page here with regards to what you're asking for? And so this is a great sheet. Even if you take anything away today, this is a sheet that you could take away and use in your process, right? So what does the sheet look like? This is it. I can send a template out later if folks are interested. Effectively, you're looking at a number of sections on the sheet, so we'll go through them in a minute. The main idea of this is to really get explicit on the core business value of the feature. Who's it for? What's it going to cost? What is the solution look like? So let's just go through this quickly. The customer, who's this for? If you have personas, pick the personas that this is targeted at and put them in here. If you don't have personas and you generally, at Xero, we would have, your employer and your employee and your accountant and your bookkeeper. Put those persona types in here, or those user types in here, right? And specifically, who is this feature or product that you're building this for, right? And then we'll look at the problem that you're solving, how you're creating value here. So you just put in, the top 3 to 5 problems that are facing that segment. Your unique value prop. This is how we as a company are uniquely solving this, right? So what's the compelling message that states, why it's going to be worth our customers actually using this thing or buying it? The solution would be how you would go about solving this. You want to have a couple different options here, so that you can have good brainstorming conversations around that. What are your metrics, right? What are your key metrics? Is it you want to drive monthly active users up, daily active users? Do you want revenue to go up? Depends where you are in your product cycle will help define what your key success metrics are. Who's going to adopt this? Who are you going to be focused on in the beginning, right? Like, is there an early adopter you can go after? Does your company have MVP vendor customers, etc.? Right? You put those in here. Are there alternatives today? So what's your competition look like? How are you going to get this to customers? How are you going to drive awareness? And so these would be your channels. Who are your stakeholders? So is it marketing, sales, external third parties? Like, who are these? Name them here. As you put these out there, you'll also start figuring out and remembering who to contact when you start figuring out what to build here. What are your key resources? So critically, both internal and external resources that you need for this, right? You need some developers maybe. You need a go-to-market key partner for this thing, perhaps. Put those in here. It always comes down to what's your business value. This is closely tied to key business success factors. And so what is the value to the business right now? It might be revenue-based, or it could be you just through a startup. So you're looking to acquire customers or activate customers. You might be looking to retain customers or monetize them, right? So there's a number of different areas that could be important here. And then finally, the cost structure, right? So how much is it going to cost to build this thing? Again, this is like, you want to get this sheet done as quickly as possible. So you're just sucking thumb on a bunch of this. If you happen to have an engineering lead with you that can help give you some guesstimates, great. But you kind of want to know, is this going to take a year, 3 months, a week, etc.? Like, you want to have some rough estimates here. So that's your product description doc. Once you've filled that out, now you can go and score it, right? Now you have a discussion around that with your exec or with your other stakeholders, and you're like, hey, is this what we're really talking about with this feature or product? They say, yes, that looks about right. Okay, cool. Let's go and score this thing, right? So what is score? Like, what we did was we wanted to come up with sort of a relative indicator of how valuable this feature or product is versus all the other feature and products we've drawn product sheets out for and have in our roadmap, right? So what's this return on investment? So what we do is we sort of estimate a cost to time number here called our EDD score, and note that this is done very quickly. So, you know, it's not going to be perfect, but you use experiments to get it better and to refine that cost, right? Once you've got that cost, then they'll go side by side. I'll show you that in a little while. Some of the metrics that might be fun to consider, this is what we consider, these are good ones for a SaaS platform. Impact per user, so what's the revenue per user per month you can expect? The cost of acquisition. So is it going to go up? Is there, like, what will the attach rate be? Is this a one-time cost? Yeah, cost of acquisition is customer acquisition is typically a one-time cost, not monthly. Churn rate, what percentage of customers are leaving, right? You could also use return rate, right? If you wanted, we use churn rate. Cost to serve, this is monthly, how much is it going to cost? You may not know this number. It's a great conversation to go figure out. Are you using AWS? How much does it cost per customer to serve them right now? The cost to build, more of a one-off cost. This will be your engineering to help you figure this out and design. And then another thing would be, how long is this going to take to get to market, right? So you want to be conservative with that number. And effectively, just remember, things usually, as you know, in engineering, take longer than you expect. So a couple of tips for EDD score is you want to start off small. So we found when we were trying to evangelize this process out to the rest of the teams that the sheet that we had was overly complicated in that you would want specific numbers. And so what we boiled down to was having a simple, a moderate, and a sort of a more complex sheet. The simple sheet is aimed to get it done very quickly and get a general score. It's not going to yield super huge amounts of value, but it's going to give you a relative score to all the other EDD scores, which is great. You can do the detailed exercise if you think that it's worth it. If this project seems, oh, this looks awesome, then go and get more detailed about it, right? Very simple is just going to be like a 5-minute exercise. Sorry, the image is not coming over here, but you're going to be like, the very simple approach would be, you know, spend 5 minutes. How much value do we think customers are going to have on a ranking of 1 to 5? A lot or a little? How hard is it going to be to build this? So that kind of talks to engineering costs. Is it going to be really hard or very easy? And then how much revenue do you think the company can earn from this? Like a very little or very lot? You're going to come up with a number, right? So going with the next step up, so the image did come out here is, you know, this is a more simple approach, right? So here you've got your those 6 or 7 metrics that you're using for the EDD score. And you can see we ended up with a result here. So it's going to be 13. We think we're going to be able to make $13 per user per month. It's going to cost us nothing to acquire these users. We're going to need about 7 engineers to run this thing permanently. And then it's going to take about 6 months. So you're looking at this kind of thing. We've got 7 critical numbers, and then we ended up with an EDD score. If you can get more complicated than that, all of the simple and the easy, the simple, and the moderate scores all would come off of this more complicated sheet, which I'm happy to share later. But that's how you would get to your EDD score. Once you've got your EDD score, you'll put them into effectively your product roadmap. This could be, here I've just changed the names with your product A, product B, feature B, and your relative scores. The higher the score, the better return it is for the company. So you look at your scores and you're like, oh, well, I've got a choice between, let's say my CEO is telling me I've got to go do product E. I could come to him and say, look, we costed our product A and B, and it looks like it's going to have a much more higher value for the customer, for the company. Are you sure that we're happy to do E, but just are you sure you want to not do A or B and put E at the top of the list? Up to you. It's your company, kind of thing, right? So it helps create useful conversations. And these are your returns on investment, basically. Again, a lot of the value from EDD comes from having these conversations. You can now line up different products and have like one number to kind of have discussions of. And if you want to go deeper, you've got your score sheet as well as your product description sheet, which is awesome. Super valuable conversations. So once you've done that and you've said, okay, cool, we want to do these 2 products, right? You then go create this roadmap. And effectively what a roadmap is a list of experiments. It's going to be development experiments, product experiments like going to do quantitative and qualitative analysis. It could be design experiments like do a wireframe, do a mock-up, test it, do some user research around it. So you build your roadmap, okay? The point of the roadmap is you don't know whether you can trust these EDD scores. You typically come up with them pretty quickly. And the goal of the roadmap is to go and spend some time figuring out whether those, as quickly as possible, figuring out whether those EDD scores are good or not, and then iterate on that. So in other words, a lot of your numbers could be gut, you don't have data, and you effectively want to build some experiments to bolster your critical numbers and increase your confidence. Your roadmap is pretty much, as I described earlier, you create experiments for each of your, at least one experiment per your critical number, right? Per cost per user or impact per user. You go one experiment for that. The more experiments you do, the better you get. All these experiments are used as part of building and designing the product as well. So you're not doing, and it all helps bring in understanding of what we're doing, right? So validating your assumptions. This is great. This is kind of like a scientific method of doing things. It's a lot of companies out there really love this approach. So if you have an approach like this and you can take it into your next job or take it to your manager, or if you're interviewing at a company and you say, yeah, I love experimentation to figure out how to monetize this product or how to build customers, this is a great way. How you do it typically is you create a hypothesis. So what are the metrics you're targeting? You then create and run an experiment that tests that hypothesis. You look at your results and document them. You then discuss that document with your team and as well as your stakeholders. And then once you've confirmed or changed your assumptions based on that discussion that you've had with your team, you can publish it. So for example, at Zero, we had run all the hypothesis experiment result stuff in-house, in our team. And then we would publish it to our company intranet so that people become aware of what it is that we're doing and why we're making certain choices. And it helps stimulate conversation, right? So here, if we have a look at this, you could say, start with your gut, decide with data, right? So hypothesis, users will find value. Here's just a quick example. Users will find value and pay for a bookkeeper on demand. Your experiment might be ask 50 customers who are bookkeepers and partners if they would be willing to pay for this kind of service. Your result might be 27 or 50 respondents said they would be willing to pay online support for a bookkeeper for up to an hour. And your conclusion is now that we feel like we have a realistic attach rate, it's over 50%, we can calculate a better return on investment from this. So we could say, oh, we thought, we would get 100% of customers paying us $1 $10 per month for this. We can adjust that now because we're not got 100%, we got 50%. So maybe we can reduce the price because we won't have as much load. So what does an experiment look like? So you've got your critical question, right? What is it that we're trying to test? We're trying to test, for example, our cost to build or our revenue per user. So what is the critical question? Your experiment will be structured in a kind of a way like this. You'd say, describe your experiment. Then you'll see if your hypothesis was correct. And then what is your hypothesis? I believe that customers will be willing to pay $10 a month in order to get a bookkeeper on demand, right? The result that you get from the experiment is this means that yeah, we're more confident that we'll be able to sell this product or this feature to at least half of our user base. Here's an example of an experiment. This is a definition for it. What we'll do to conduct the experiment, the data we gather and how to analyze it, what we expect the data to show, and how we will interpret the data if it is what we expect, right? So here's an example. We will research competitors' Y pricing offering for feature X. Then we'll see if our planned pricing is less expensive. We believe that our planned pricing is less expensive than theirs, and this means that our customers will pay $1 per transaction, so we can be more confident in our monthly revenue per user critical number. Okay, that's kind of like you'd effectively frame all your stuff. Like you might frame a user research experiment this way. And in our team, we framed everything. Even dev work would be framed as an experiment. So pricing and costing your experiments. I'm going to go through this a little quicker, but effectively each experiment we had cost. This is very useful, especially from a PM perspective, because you're not really used to costing how much work it's going to take to, go get data and figure out what it means, etc. Like we became, as a product and design team, we became very good at figuring out how long it was going to take to get some critical data for deciding on product stuff. And so we would know, let's say a business intelligence team might take 2 weeks to return specific kinds of data queries. Okay, well, our lag time is going to be 2 weeks for that, right? Or I already have the numbers for that. I can do this experiment in 4 hours. That kind of stuff becomes really useful. It also, from a development and design perspective, getting real crisp on estimates becomes easier and easier over time. When you've built your roadmap of experiments, this might be an example of a couple of experiments. You might have 60 experiments in there. You might have 10. It's up to you. But you effectively here, you'd have a cost of certainty. So how much is this going to help you understand your product and improve it? And then you've got your experiments laid out. And then what my team would do is we'd put these into Trello and effectively work them through a Trello board. So we knew which experiments were being run at what time and in what state they were in. Your experiment process, and you just go through this very quickly. You have your idea, so that's in your sheet. You pull it into your Trello board. You design the experiment, right? What are we going to do to prove this idea out? Right? What's the definition of what is the experiment we're going to run in order to get this number? Okay, once it's been designed, at some point, someone in the team can pick it up and start working on it, right? This could be a developer, or PM, or a designer. You might get into a point where you're waiting for data. Once you've got your data, you can document your findings, then debate your findings, and then publish them, as I talked about earlier. This is an example of a Trello board, right? So an experiment board. You'd have, the Darth Vaders represent the developers, the Stormtroopers represent the PMs and design, and the disappointed father might might mean that the estimate hasn't been reviewed and it's taking a long time to design this experiment. So the Death Star for us, we came up with some fun things for the team to use, but the Death Star might mean this is a massive experiment. It's going to take 2+ weeks to do. And so each of your cards will effectively have the title of the experiment, and you just move them through the board so you can see, oh, these are the ones we're waiting on data for. These are the ones we're currently working on. Here's the ones we're documenting findings on. And so this gives the team a very clear idea of what PM is doing, what dev is doing, and what design is doing at any point in time. Once you've got those results, the idea is then to document them. So what was the data you collected? And then figure out, what was the quality? Did you gain any useful insights from the data, right? If you didn't get anything new or you weren't able to get the data, it was a bad experiment, and that's okay. You learned something anyway. But maybe you get some really useful data. How much did it take? So you budgeted out. You did an estimate. I thought this was going to take me 4 hours, and it takes 16 hours, right? So mentioning the budget in that results document helps. and it also helps with transparency as well as future estimates. Did your confidence in the product go up or go down? Did you prove that you think you're going to make more money with this product for the company? Or did you results say, oh, actually, we thought we were going to make money, but it looks like we're going to leak money based on how we're designing this thing, right? So that helps with your confidence. And then you share your results with the company. If you have an intranet like Yammer or Jostle or whatever the case may be, share it to the company. Like get exposure for what your team's doing. This is really great to get visibility for the team, as well as to educate the company on all the great stuff that teams are doing. I find in a lot of roles that I've had in different companies, you've got all these smart people getting paid loads of money to do research, to come up with ideas for products. And then, that stuff effectively gets lost in the ether. It's difficult to find it in Slack, or, it might be stored somewhere that's difficult for people to get to. If you have it like published into one place, it's typically great to do that. Plus, the way we did our process was we'd shoot a video. So like each member of the team who did the experiment would film themselves using like QuickTime or something, walking through the experiment stock, so that it's easy for the company to consume. They can just watch a 90-second video to a 5-minute video on this experiment, what it was for, what was learned, instead of going to pass through a long spec, which people typically tend not to like doing. So once you've gone through that process for your product, you just keep doing it, right? You lather, rinse, and repeat, right? You refine your assumptions, you add more experiments. Successive experiments increase your yield. They help you effectively. You can abandon projects if you think it's upfront. Like we're able to, in a previous project, not do specific features that saved our company 7 figures because of the results we got from running experiments. Very, very powerful and provable and trackable results if you use something like this for your company. And that way, as a product manager, if you're using a process like this, people know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what the value of it is to the company. And that's often a difficult thing to communicate in product management. So this is a great way to effectively guide people, help them to understand that, all the stakeholders in the company. And with that, that's the EDD process in a nutshell. If you're interested in learning more about it, you can reach out to me on Twitter at Joshua Vincent, or go to my website. My email address is up there. And I'm happy to, I've got templates for these various things, and I'm happy to also have one-on-one chats if you've got questions, about any of these things in the process. I know that I went through it very quickly, and it gets pretty deep. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.
How much time would you spend on prioritizing different features? Because it may slow down the process. As you explained, it involves like hypothesis, then doing experiments, and then coming up with the results, and then a decision. So usually on a general project, what percentage of time do you spend on prioritizing things?
As much as possible, because whatever time you spend on prioritizing things has multiplying effects. Like if you end up building the wrong thing for the company, that's even if it's one engineer, that's you're burning through money, lots of money and time on many people's part. So however much extra time you have, you should use on prioritizing things. That being said, the goal of the EDD process, at least for the first 2 parts, like that sheet that I went through and the scoring, that can be done in an hour. Like we'd often get requests from the CEO or execs, hey, we've got this great idea, go figure it out, right? Or go build it. Like stop what the team's doing. Just your engineering team might have been working on a product for a month. So you've already invested $100,000 in the product, and now your execs got some hot new thing they want to go build. It's very derailing. So it's worth taking an hour or 2, going to flesh out what that thing actually is, and then feeding it back to your management chain and saying, hey, this is what we think we heard. Is this right? Is this really what you want? And it helps do a quick turnaround for so that your execs can see, hey, this person I'm paying top dollar for has done a lot of thought about this very quickly, right? And they've covered all the bases, and we think that it's scored. And then also by looking at what your scores are, and that score sheet doesn't take long to do, right? You're looking at an hour's worth of work initially, and then later you spend more time on it. Once someone says, hey, go do that product, or go flesh that out more, you can go and spend more time on it. But to answer your question, the initial part is very quick, right? You want to spend an hour, maybe 4 hours at most, going and getting that initial sheet done, right? And you can refine it over time. If you have 2 days to do it, great, like do more research. But doing that homework up front is better than, being a headless chicken in the office, effectively.
Yep, makes sense. Okay, cool. And can you also elaborate more the criteria of deciding hypothesis? So when your executives come up with a new feature or with a new request, do you have any criterias or some set of rules that helps you to come up with the number of hypotheses? Or can you give an example of that?
Right. No. So the question is, like, how many experiments do you really want to come up with or hypotheses you want to come up with for your product? What our rule of thumb is to try do at least one per critical number, right? So if you've got 7 critical numbers, you want to do 7 experiments. And those don't necessarily mean writing code or designing a workflow. They could just be ask BI for some information about something. So for example, let's say your company was doing, you thought you could make, that in the example in the deck that I just presented, there was a bookkeeper feature where you'd say, oh, we think we could charge customers extra $10 a month to have a bookkeeper. An experiment there might be to go to validate that number, go and interview 20 people and see if that seems okay to them or not. If they all say it's okay, that's 20 people you've interviewed before you've written any code to validate that shit, we could actually make money here. So look at your critical numbers, the ones that you're most unsure about, go through those and figure out what experiment you can run to become more confident, right? Before running off and spending, it's very, very compelling sometimes for people to go and just get their devs starting to build stuff and the design team engaged in designing stuff. As PMs, we really need to be a better filter for those teams and to use the resources wisely.
Got it. Thanks. My next question is how EDD is related to product launch. Suppose you decide, oh, this feature is better than other based on EDD approach, but sometimes at product launch, the results are much different as per our expectation. So do you implement EDD again to relaunch your product with an updated design or maybe with an updated feature?
Yeah, right. So at launch, launch is just getting something out and then iterating, right? You just run through the exact same process, whether you're doing waterfall, agile, EDD plus waterfall and agile, or EDD on its own. You launch something and then you've got to monitor it as a PM. You're looking at, did it do what we thought it was going to do? Are users using it the way it's being used? What kind of support calls are we getting from CX? The whole iteration of figuring out what to do next. Your 3 key buckets when you launch something is, do we iterate more? Do we leave it as is, or do we kill it, right? And so you might come up with a hypothesis that based on the input you're seeing, we think we should iterate more, right? People are using this more, we're making more money, shit, we really think we could monetize this higher. Or you might say, well, we are good enough now, this is a baseline feature. As an example, users can now update automatically their software, so we don't need to make that any more fancy, let's move on to the next thing. So you would effectively go through that thought process in figuring out what to do next, and you can frame those, the decisions you're making as experiments.
Got it. I have some of the questions which are related to product management interviews, and I think there would be like so many people who would be interested in this type of question. So I've seen this question so many times in interviews, and I think we can relate it to EDD process. So like how many people are flying out of LA airport every day, right? How can we use data or like the assumptions and the experiment method to answer this question? Do you have any thoughts on it?
Well, that's an analytical type question. Those come up, whether you're interviewing at Google or Amazon, etc. You want to have like a process for that. And if you're asking specifically about interviewing, I highly recommend reading Decode and Conquer or Cracking the PM Interview. They have analytics sections. And these questions are really fun. These puzzles are really fun to solve. But the standard approach to tackling a analytical type question, like how many people are leaving the LA airport every day, is to clarify the question. Do you mean, are they leaving by aeroplane or cars or bus? Like what, you clarify that question that person's asking you, right? So that you're answering the question that they're actually answering. Then figure out generally what your, either then write down your assumptions or figure out your equation, right? So your assumptions might be, well, how many people in the population, how many people live in LA, how many people land in LA. You might want to just go through and draw the assumptions that you think you might need to make an equation. Make your equation and then start figuring out how you plug the pieces of your equation in. And in interviews that ask these analytical questions, not all companies do it, but those that do, it's good to have like an interview, like a data cheat sheet in a way. Like I actually have one of those myself. In Cracking the PM Interview, they have one, but it's a little outdated. But you could go and for the company you're interviewing at, how many customers does it say they have if they're a public company, or if they're not, can you find any information about how many customers they have? Like go get some basic rough numbers about the company you're interviewing at. They may not ask you any analytical questions about the company itself. They may ask you the general, how many golf balls does it take to fit in a 747, or how many policemen do you think there are in the US? You can effectively come up with they're not testing you for the answer. They're testing you for how you think about the problem and how you communicate those thoughts. So you want to be very clear and use the whiteboard to write those numbers down, the assumptions, the clarifications, as well as the equation for that thing, right?
Perfect.
You want to get your question, like, you don't want to be orders of magnitude off, and you won't be if you hit it properly. So like, let's say your resulting answer to that was, the actual answer to how many people leave LA airport every day is something like 500,000. You don't want your answer to be 100 million, but if it's 1.5 million, that's not orders of magnitude different, right? If it's 300,000 or whatever, like 2 million even, that's not orders of magnitude different. So you want to just throw random numbers out there, and you want to double check your calculations as you make that.
Perfect. Thank you. How will you decide if a feature launch is successful or not? Are there any set of KPIs that you use every single time, or that can be used for any with any product launch?
Well, it's different to the type of, like, if you're selling hardware devices, software as a service, or tickets, right? It's going to be different. Like, so if you're Eventbrite selling tickets, your measurement is going to be around stuff, specifically around ticket sales, for example, perhaps. Whereas if you're a SaaS platform, like, or a marketplace, you're going to have different success metrics. These types of success metrics are very well documented and defined and discussed for different types of industries. For SaaS, as an example, you're going to want your cost to acquire customer, your churn rate, your lifetime value, sort of these high level numbers that are really important to that type of business. They're critical to that type of business. But then when you look at exactly the product that you launch, it's going to be slightly different. It's going to be, hey, what was the success metric for the company at the time we decided to do this product and ship it? So your company might be in a rapid growth phase. So your success metrics are going to be around, for example, user acquisition. Your company might be more mature and you've got customers already. You're not really worried about the funnel, and you're releasing a product specifically in order to increase revenue. Then your success metric for that product is going to be around revenue. And if your product is hardware, revenue is going to be based on maybe sales of hardware, or sales of, if you're iPhone, or if you're Apple iPhone, or Amazon's Alexa, you're going to be looking at how much digital content or is sold or products are sold through that hardware device, like the Echo as an example. So in other words, you as the product manager need to be very clear with your management. What is my success metric for this product at this stage in the company's life cycle?
Perfect. Yep. As you have moved from, as you've worked like in different companies in Microsoft, you had your own startup. How would you define a career path of a product manager? Is there any steps, for example, like from product manager to senior product manager? So what positions can new grads target, and so that they can move to a successful product manager role maybe in 5 years?
Right. So new grads, depends. So if you're a new grad, if you're like coming from an engineering background, like I did a computer science postgrad at university and then went to work at Microsoft. They give me a very technical interview to, and I passed, and they asked me, do you want to be a PM, a developer, or a tester? And so I didn't really know, and I chose PM. And maybe I should have chosen developer, I don't know. But different people have different ways of getting into product management. If you're a new grad, some of your best ways to do are to find an industry that you're passionate about and see if you can get a PM role there. Or if you're a graduate of like a business thing, you could take on a BD type role and then transition. A lot of people transition once they're in a company over to product management if they didn't get hired in as a PM. If you want to get hired in straight as a PM, the best thing to do is figure out what your superpowers are, right? And then do some research as to companies that would want that, and then like spend a bunch of time figure out how you might make that company successful, and then apply to that company or to some set of companies using that study that you did, right? Because that way you're going into an interview. The company is interviewing a lot of other people, and you know their business, you know who their users are, you have some ideas for features they might want to build. You go there very prepared, and that's a great way to make a great first impression and show that you really care about the job. So if you're coming in from a development, let's say you're a developer for a couple of years, web dev or whatever the case may be, and you want to be a PM, your superpower is going to be in technical, right? So go find a technical PM role dealing with a company's, helping build a company's API or backend infrastructure, right? If you're coming from a design background, right, you're a designer at a company for a while, graphic designer, you've got design superpowers. Go find a company who needs entry-level PMs for consumer-facing stuff. Like figure out the way to get in based on what companies might see value in you for.
Perfect. Is it mandatory to have a technical background or like degree in engineering to become a product manager? I've seen like people jumping into product management role even after having like a degree in economics. So how does that work?
Yeah, you can. It's no problem. Like I've worked with people who have degrees in psychology. In fact, I think either a degree in engineering or psychology are the perfect things for PM. Because the PM is a very soft skill type thing, and understanding people is very important. I think it's, as a PM, you're working with engineers all the time. Having some kind of computer science or engineering understanding, even if it's like a computer science 101 type thing, like an entry-level coding course, etc., that is going to help you. It's going to help you a lot with regards to communicating with engineers. You can be highly successful without that. Lots of people are. Some companies require you to have a technical background. Like Google, you have to have a technical background. They're going to ask you technical questions. So you have to, if you want to get in there, you have to have a technical background. But lots of companies don't care, right? They just want someone who understands how to build product, understands user thinking. As the product manager, you wear the user hat all the time. You need to be able to speak that language too.